Okay, now let's talk about activity and layout files a little bit in more detail. Before we do that, let me show you what we have till now. So we had an application that we created which has a bunch of files and we went over those files. I'm not going to use the project version of it. I'm going to use the Android look of the projects because I like to see only the file that I am interested in. So it shows your manifest file, your resources, and your Java file inside main activity. Yeah, we have main activity here and our layout file is right over here. So what is an activity? So activity is a single focused thing that the user can work with. Almost all activities interact with the user, so the activity class takes care of creating a window for you in which you can place your UI with a function called a set content view, which you can see right here, set content view. And while activities are often presented to user as full screen windows, which was our case, they can also be used in other ways as floating windows using a theme. There's a theme called as window is floating, which you can set and it will be floating window, or you can embed it inside another activity using activity groups. So we'll look at them a little later. But activities in the system are managed as an activity stack. When a new activity is started, it is placed on top of the stack and becomes the running activity. So you can have a stack of bunch of activities one below another. The previous activity always remains below it in the stack and will not come to the foreground again until the new activity exits. So by pressing a back button, you can get rid of a current activity which is on the top. An activity has essentially four states. If an activity is the foreground of the screen at the top of the stack, it is active or running. If the activity has lost its focus but is still visible, that is, there's a new activity on top of it. It is in paused state, like not completely uh, hidden. That is like new non-full sized or transparent activity has focus on top of your activity, so you can still see it. So that's the paused state. A paused activity is completely alive. It maintains all the state and member information and remains attached to the window manager, but can be killed by the system in extreme low memory situations, and we'll talk about that in our memory video. If an activity is completely obscured by another activity, so let's say another activity comes on top of your current activity, the previous activity which is below it is in the stopped state. Uh, it still retains all the state and member information. However, it is no longer visible to the user, so its window is hidden and it will often be killed by the system when memory is needed elsewhere. And we will talk about all these different states in more detail when we do the life cycle of activity. So if an activity is paused or stopped, the system can, so the fourth state, which is actually non-existent state because the activity is killed. And this happens like, let's say if an activity is paused or stopped, the system can drop the activity from the memory by either asking it to finish or simply killing its process. When it is displayed again to the user, it must be completely restarted and restored to its previous state. That's up to the user of how developer of how he kind of writes the code for it. So it will call the onCreate method of the activity lifecycle, which is what you see already added here, but we'll talk about it more in detail when our lifecycle method. Let's go to the second part, which is the layout. Now, a layout defines the visual structure for a user interface, such as the UI for an activity or app widget. You can declare a layout in two ways. First way is declare UI elements in XML. Android provides a straightforward XML vocabulary that corresponds to the view classes and subclasses, such as those for widgets and layout, which we just see it here in our activity main file, where we can add just using XML. So this is one way of doing it. And the second way of creating it is instantiating layouts elements at runtime. Your application can create a view and view group objects. Whatever we did in XML can be done in Java programmatically. So inside your main activity, you can do that. So instead of adding it this activity main right here using set content view, you can also add them programmatically here, and we'll see it in one of the videos later how to do that ourselves. Now the Android framework gives you the flexibility to use either or both of these methods for declaring and managing your application's UI. For example, you could Declare your application default layout in XML, including the screen elements that will appear in them and their properties. You could then add code in your application that would modify the state of the screen objects, including those declared in XML at runtime. So you can write the code in Java, which can modify the XML stuff that you did in layout your layout XML file. The advantage of declaring your UI in XML is that it enables you to better separate the presentation of your application from the code that controls its behavior. Yeah, instead of writing everything in Java file, you can separate out the UI elements in XML and just manipulate them inside your Java file. So that kind of makes your code more clean, keeps it separate. Your UI descriptions are external to your application code, which means that you can modify or adapt it without having to modify your source code and recompile. For example, you can create your XML layouts for different screen orientations, different device screen sizes, and different languages. Additionally, declaring the layout in XML makes it easier to visualize the structure of your UI, so it's easier to debug problems. So that's why I kind of make sure that every single project that I do, except for one where I'll show you how to not use this layout file and just write everything programmatically. So I'm going to show you that. But for now, these are two important files, Java file and main. And initially, we'll just work with one single screen. So that means only one activity. But later on, after probably a couple of videos, I'm going to show you how to make multiple activities and how to go front and back between them and how the life cycle works or affects everything after that. So that's it.